Hello and welcome to the Vale. I'm Elarune, and just a little quick disclaimer about the video that's about to follow. This was originally part of a Minecraft stream, but I completely forgot to capture the game, so it wound up just being the audio. But in it, I had a pretty fun conversation with myself, I guess, about Jujutsu Kaisen and the Gojo and Geto relationship therein. So I thought it would be interesting enough to share it on its own. Please enjoy. Now, I was thinking of what kinds of things I should discuss in these videos, and it came to mind that it would probably be better to just talk about things I enjoy, because why else talk about anything if I'm not having fun? So, I have a ton of hobbies, like just a metric ton of them, but among those, one of my favorites is watching anime. So, I've actually been watching a lot of Jujutsu Kaisen lately, which I know some people like and some people don't. Everyone's entitled to their opinion, but I'm actually only on season 2. And I've been on season 2 for about the last, maybe 4 months. So the thing is, I get really, really attached to characters, and especially characters with like really compelling emotional stories. And season 1 was excellent, but I was able to breeze through season 1 because while I felt attached to some of the characters, none of the stories really gripped me the same way that like Geto Suguru's story does. And I don't know why I'm so fascinated by this character. Well, I'm sure part of it's his looks. He's certainly very attractive, but that's not really enough to make me like a character, you know? I think a large part of it is just how conflicted he makes me feel. Because he starts, like at the beginning of season 1, very first episode, he's clearly very kind and just an overall nice guy. He gets along well with Satoru and plays along. He seems a little mischievous at times, but overall, like there's that whole basketball scene where he's lecturing Gojo on like morals, like a whole lecture about why it's their responsibility to watch out for the people who are weaker than them, the non-sorcerers. And it's so interesting to me how warped that becomes as you go on. Now, pardon me for any spoilers if you haven't watched Jujutsu Kaisen and intend to do so. Now would be the time when you should go do that, and then maybe come back to this discussion because this will be spoiler heavy. But the way that his key motivation there in being a sorcerer, which seems to be to care for others and to protect others who are weaker than him, how that becomes the key motivation for his darkening later. Because part of it is certainly the trauma from watching Rico die, like just having her get shot right in front of him after she's decided to live her own life and then having that taken from her so cruelly. Certainly that has a lot to do with his like downfall, but I think that was more like the straw that broke the camel's back, you know? It didn't start with that. It started a lot before that. And I think it started with the very search for meaning that he has, where he's really trying to find his place in the world and a good motivation for doing what he's doing. And it makes sense him being a teenager that this would be front and center, as all teenagers are pretty much just exploring and trying to figure out who they are in the world and who they are as people. And he, at some point, for whatever reason, again, I actually haven't read the manga, so I don't know if they expand on this, but he's decided that his purpose in the world, the fact that he has powers, it's kind of like a Peter Parker situation. He's decided like power gives him responsibility, and he has the duty to use his powers for others and not for himself. And that's really interesting in contrast to Satoru, because Satoru is over here and he's the strongest sorcerer ever, or at least he will be one day. Sukuna not included, I guess, but he will be one day, right? And he's very arrogant with it, almost entirely self centered, thinking about using this power for himself, almost, or more, less of that, and maybe why should he feel indebted to protect others? Why does him merely having power mean that he has to sacrifice for others? And that's where they start, with Geto having the idea that power equals responsibility, and Gojo saying, no, power does not equal any particular responsibility, it's mine to do with as I please. Which is kind of the way society, or at least what we're mostly what we're all taught to think, right? We all watch someone like Peter Parker as Spider-Man and think, well, that makes sense. Clearly, power brings responsibility. Of course, you should use it responsibly and to help others who are weaker than yourselves, and that's the noble thing to do, right? But then you look at that and you take a look at how old these people are. How old is Peter? And I'm sorry to keep bringing up Spider-Man. It's just, that was something that had a big impact on me when I was little with Spider-Man. And I see a lot of parallels with Geto somehow. Um, but you look at how young Spider-Man was. He was a teenager when he got his powers, right? And I believe he made a mistake, and that caused his uncle to die, almost. Or at least that's how Peter sees it. Depends on which version of the story you're going with. Certain comics have different slight variations on that. And Geto has a very similar idea. But he's also a teenager. I don't, as a freshman, how old is he? Maybe 15? And yet he has it in his head that, and Jujutsu Society is reinforcing it, that he has to go out and protect everyone else. And you see how that destroys him mentally and he spirals. You see these characters and they're super young. They're like maybe 15, 16, maybe even 14, depending on the source material. And they believe they have this big purpose, this big responsibility. And they've been told this by society. Especially, at least with Peter Parker, there's, some aspects of, hey, reality, he's pretty much a child. I think that's addressed in some places or in some comics. But in Jujutsu Kaisen, if you look at one, the character design, the characters, at least Geto, looks almost like an adult. There's some changes in like muscle mass as he grows, but looking at Geto as an adult and as a teenager, there's not as much difference as I would expect to see, from a real life teenager. And there's something similar in the Jujutsu Society where, how to explain it? It's such a hard thing to talk about. They're basically treating these children as free labor, right? They send them out, they send them on missions, acting as though this was some sort of education that they're receiving. But in actuality, they're being used as like free labor to go take care of curses. And I believe, I don't remember quite well, at least at first, I think they're going on missions together. But was it second year where that whole Star Plasma Vessel mission happened? I don't remember if it was second year or first year. All of Jujutsu Society says that this is your responsibility, that your place in the world is to kill curses, and that's it. And it's also very well known that you will likely die doing this. And most sorcerers never make it to be that old. And this is just an accepted fact. This is just what it means to have the power that you have, that you will use it to take down curses, to protect the people who cannot protect themselves, and then you will probably die young, protecting people. So you're going to die young, and it's just accepted. But the thing is, Satoru Gojo, he's like almost like a god in their world, and he's definitely not going to die, right? Because he's all powerful in their eyes. But everyone else, pretty much, all the other sorcerers, they can die young, and no one cares. Well, they care when their friends die, but the higher-ups don't really care. And of course, Geto looks at this, and at first, I guess maybe he feels, I mean, he's been kind of indoctrinated, right? He's been told that, hey, this is normal. And even in regular society, it's kind of thought that people with power should use that power for others and not for themselves. So maybe he thinks this is natural, that he has power, therefore he must use it for others, and it's totally okay that he's going to die young because, well, apparently that's what he was born to do. Why else would he have these powers? And that is an awful way to think, or an awful message to give any child, right? Like, and then you have to imagine as well what it was like for him growing up. His parents are not sorcerers. So if he ever said anything about what he saw, would anyone have ever believed him? And if they didn't, they probably would have just thought he's crazy, right? So you grow up, probably your whole life knowing you're different. Maybe you think you're a little bit crazy. Your whole family might think you're crazy. But then suddenly you're told, oh, you're not crazy at all. It's just you have these powers. And these powers mean you have a responsibility and a duty to protect others. And that can seem so noble. And it's really interesting the way the delivery, when Geto is talking to Gojo about this, when he talks about like what their responsibility is, what their purpose is, he seems to believe it, but you can also see like a look of frustration, a look of, well, he certainly doesn't look happy while he's talking about it. And then when Gojo then goes in and counters everything he said with just basically, why should I do anything for anyone? And basically just calls that whole idea stupid. And they almost break into a fight. Because clearly, Geto's entire worldview has just been insulted. And it's just really interesting the contrast there of Gojo seems to be seeking to lead a meaningless life, or at least he's not trying to find meaning in anything. And Geto seems to be trying to find meaning like literally anywhere, like any reason to explain what he's been through and what he's going through. And then the Star Plasma Vessel mission happens. And it's so heartbreaking. Because basically, Geto and Gojo come to an agreement and they decide, I'm pretty sure, that Riko should be allowed to do whatever she wants to, right? Because she's a child. Keep in mind, she's like the same age as them, I'm pretty sure. But she's a child and her whole life has been decided for her, but she should have an option of what she wants to do. She should be able to choose her fate. Keep in mind, neither Gojo nor Geto can really choose their fate. The moment the moment Geto became sorcerer, he was basically put into the school and told, this is your purpose. And Gojo has had his purpose told to him ever since he was a child. So even though he might choose to reject that purpose, it's still one that he follows through on because he attends the school, he takes down curses, and while Gojo is somewhat rebellious, he, for the most part, just does what he's told to do. Like, he's mischievous and rebellious, but he still does it. He still protects people. So it's kind of hard to say that he doesn't believe that that's his purpose, or that he rejects that being his purpose, when clearly that's how he acts. And yet both of them almost want to believe that it's possible for someone to choose their own fate. Because clearly they want Riko to have that option. And in the very moment she's made the choice to live for herself, Geto has to watch. She's literally shot in the head the moment she decides to go against what fate has decided for her. And that is just so tragic. Unspeakably heartbreaking. And at the same time, he believes Gojo is dead. So you can imagine how awful, like how traumatizing, how just destructive that would be on a young man's mind. And then later, of course, he finds out, well, Gojo's not dead because apparently now he can just bring himself back to life. He can just save, or not bring himself back to life, but bring himself from the very brink of death. He can just heal himself. And he's basically become the god that everyone always said he was going to be, that he was fated to be. Because his infinity is now like infinite. He can just automatically keep things from hurting him. And he can heal himself pretty much automatically too, so he's kind of untouchable. Almost immortal, except that he still ages. So Riko was unable to go against her fate. The moment she tried to do so, she was killed. Gojo wound up following through on his fate. And there's nothing he could have done about that, because the other option would have been to just let himself die, I guess. So now you have, in very close proximity, two vivid examples during a very traumatizing event of how impossible it is to go against the fate that society has deemed they must follow through. And then you can see him spiraling from there on. Of course, apparently there's no way he's going to get to see a therapist of any kind. I wonder if they even have that profession as an option. Because they can't go to regular therapists, of course, because what even would they say? Oh yes, curses exist. And no one else can see them, but I can. They would sound, again, insane. So no chance of therapy, no chance of anything really. He's just left to just process everything that just happened on his own. And at the same time, Gojo and him are no longer sent. on pretty much any joint missions, it looks like. He has to go do his own missions. Gojo has to do his own. After all, Gojo is now basically a god and does not need a partner, or at least that's how the higher ups would see it. Probably how Gojo himself might see it. So now Suguru is left all on his own to try and come to terms with everything that has happened and how his worldview has been just completely shattered. Except that it hasn't. Because his original worldview was that those who are strong must protect the weak. Almost that they have a fate to do so. They have a responsibility to do so. And to not do so is, I suppose, evil. Well, what does he learn after the whole star plasma vessel situation? He learns that it's impossible to go against your fate. And those who try, well, there's only pain and death for them. So in a way, it actually, I don't think his worldview was broken at all. It was solidified in a way. At least the fact that you cannot go against what fate has deemed, what Jujutsu Society has deemed. So what do you do? And he starts almost looking for a way out, I think. Or a, like, so what now? Is this going to be his life? Just watching the people near him die? Just watching Satoru become an untouchable god who no longer needs him? And then Haibara dies. And it's just from like a misclassified mission too, I think. Like total, I guess, mistake on Jujutsu Society's part, right? They just let this guy die for a mistake. And now, of course, Geto has to live with the fact again that all of his friends are going to die. And probably him too. Everyone's probably going to die except maybe Gojo. And he thinks that's unfair because obviously it is. It is deeply unfair. It's also unfair to Gojo because Gojo now has to stand alone. Gojo can't rely on anyone because everyone relies on him. And it makes me wonder how much or what exactly did Geto feel towards Gojo at that point? Did he feel resentful towards Gojo for leaving him behind? Or did he feel, I don't know. It's really hard to say. How did that make him feel? Because if you think about what winds up happening with Geto burning down the whole village, right? And just abandoning Jujutsu Society. And then the breakup in front of the KFC. I don't mean to laugh. It's just kind of funny to me that it would be specifically the KFC and that the KFC has become such a thing for the fandom. So going back to that thought. So they break up in front of the KFC, right? And, well, before we get there, before we ever got there, the whole thing with the village, where Geto came here to protect these non-sorcerers, take care of whatever curse is there, and then while that's happening, he's shown a cage with two little girls inside of it, two twin girls, and told after he has defeated the curse that, well, these girls started the problem, so they've been imprisoned here. And they look in pretty bad shape. So he's told these girls are the problem. Of course, he knows for a fact that these girls are not the problem. They are not a problem at all. And these people are just, how to describe them? Scared of not scared of. I don't want to be dismissive, but basically scared of their own shadow, right? They don't know what's going on. They have no idea. They don't know curses exist. They just know bad things are happening. And these girls have some connection to it. And at that point, Geto just loses it, right? Which I think pretty much anyone would in that situation. He's already been run down by just so many missions. So many missions having to swallow these cursed orbs that taste like vomit and do it all alone when he's not even processed the trauma of what he went through before. And I'm certain just the way those missions tend to go, he's probably got all sorts of fresh trauma from those as well. And now you have this people imprisoning little girls and saying that they're the root cause of the issue when he knows for a fact that they are not. And he decides to burn down the village and comes to the conclusion that non-sorcerers are not worth protecting. In fact, non-sorcerers are the issue, and thus they should be, I guess, dealt with the same way he deals with all issues like curses. They should be killed because without them, at least that way in his mind, maybe curses would stop. And then maybe, if that happened, there would be no need for Jujutsu sorcerers to fight curses. And then somehow that will lead to a utopia where sorcerers just can live in peace and not have to die fighting for people who will never know or understand what they are sacrificing. And in a way, that really makes sense. But it also makes no sense at all. Because how can a genocide of an entire group of what's probably 98% of the population of Earth ever fix the issues that are plaguing sorcerers? Maybe it gets curses to stop, or maybe in trying to kill all these people, you just cause mass terror, causing even stronger curses to form. But at this point, I think Gojo has, or not Gojo, Geto has pretty much, he's pretty much just, he almost comes across as someone with self-harming tendencies and ideations. Why I say that? Because the moment he decides to follow through on all of these, like this really dark path, he seems very relieved. He seems like a load's off his shoulders, like finally, he doesn't have to worry about anything anymore. Part of me thinks he really expected maybe Satoru to kill him after what he did to the village. Because, like, even when he goes to walk away from Satoru, he basically says, it's okay if you kill me, because there would be meaning in that. Or some version of that in Japanese. I don't speak Japanese, I can only go based off the subtitles. So there would be meaning if you killed me. So he still, his entire life, he's obsessed, just obsessed with there being a meaning for everything. Because there has to be a meaning behind the suffering, right? Otherwise, like, what's the point? Otherwise, why keep going if there's no meaning? There has to be a meaning, otherwise, how can he continue? So the fact that Gojo cannot bring himself to kill Geto in that moment, and then Geto gets to keep living and actually follow through with his ideals, I wonder if part of him never expected that to actually happen. If maybe he thought that he would just be killed, like, right then and there. Because it's kind of hard to explain, like, why he becomes so relieved, so joyful at the thought that he's going to have to go down this dark path and kill so many people, like literally billions of people. I think part of him always knew that that wasn't actually going to be something he would be capable of, or he would actually be able to pull off. Part of him probably knew he'd be stopped before that ever happened. Which is why I compare him to someone who's like just completely given up on life. Because he pretty much has. Nah, I'm making myself sad just talking about this. Very dark topic. And then you watch Jujutsu Kaisen 0, which I actually watched before season 2, which is kind of like similar to the Star Wars situation. If you watch like the latter, like the original series, and then you watch the prequels, you know where the story's going. You just don't know how it's going to get there. And somehow I think that made it hit so much harder. Because the entire time I'm looking at a young Geto and how kind and good he seems, and just wondering, well, how are they going to make it all make sense? And they do it amazingly. Like, the whole transformation absolutely makes sense in my opinion. It's also just extremely tragic. And then at the very end of Jujutsu Kaisen 0, when, again, spoilers for everything, I guess, uh, when Geto has been defeated by Yuta and Gojo has to come and kill him, Geto doesn't try to fight at all at that point. He just sits down against the wall and he's smiling. He's smiling and laughing. Not at Satoru. He seems truly like he's not mocking at this point. He seems truly relieved and almost happy. I think because like he knows at this point that it's all done. His suffering is over. There's no way he gets to live after all of this, and he doesn't even want to. But what really breaks my heart is Satoru has gone through the very similar things to what Geto has. They were both on that Star Plasma vessel mission. They both had to deal with isolation after that and being alone, and especially Gojo because he's literally alone. He is the most powerful person, and everyone depends on him now. No one, especially after Geto leaves, no one can ever be his equal. And thus, no one can ever really understand because they look at him and they see such a powerful person, how great their life must be. Because clearly, if someone has all that power, they have to be happy, right? But nothing could be further from the truth. Which actually made me go back and rewatch the first season of Jujutsu Kaisen because it puts Gojo's entire personality and character into a completely different light. When you look at a person and at first he seems so mischievous and so happy-go-lucky and just so bright and full of life. And then you see his past and you go and you watch his presence again and you see he's not actually any of those things. He's actually deeply sad and alone. Gojo is not anything that he portrays himself to be. He's actually like, I mean, maybe he's probably mischievous and he definitely wants the best for his students, but I don't think he's actually a happy person, like at all, for the most part. I think he's mostly just really sad and lonely. But he doesn't show that to anyone because, like, no one wants to hear it from the most powerful guy in the entire world that, hey, I'm actually super sad. Like, I lost the person who meant so much to me and who still means so much. And no one's there because he doesn't ever really, like, Shoko is his friend, but he doesn't confide in her as much as I think he would have with Geto if Geto had remained around. He shares some things with her, Like, he clearly trusts her because he trusts her to protect the secret of Yuji, right? And to not tell the higher ups that Yuji is still alive. And they're clearly still friends, but I don't know if he tells her like his innermost, like the things that make him sad. Although he is comfortable enough with both her and Ijichi to tell them about like his thoughts about the higher ups and the fact that maybe he should just kill them all after what they did to Yuji. So I don't know. That relationship's a bit hard to read for me. But regardless, still think he's pretty lonely. There's other people like Utahime, who he seems to love messing with. I don't think it's in a romantic way, though, but maybe it is, maybe it isn't. You just have Gojo over there being all lonely and sad, but coming across as one of the happiest, or at least happy-go-lucky, I guess is the term for it, like guys in the entire thing. But then you look at him, and he clearly loves his students. He tries to be like super present for them, and like he protects Yuta and Yuji to the best of his ability and the best that he can without getting the higher ups like ire. Well, without getting too much ire. So he seems to have his purpose. He seems to have set his purpose to be to protect his students and to raise up, like he says, to raise up a group of sorcerers who will be like on par with him and who will reshape the Jujutsu society. And that's rather than just wiping out all the people he disagrees with. And a lot of that you can see is definitely influenced by Suguru. Because the younger Geto or Gojo didn't have those ideals at all. He was all about like living for himself and not letting others like control him and things like that. Or at least that's how he came across to me. And then fast forward all the way to Shibuya, right before Gojo's about to get sealed. And he spent all this time missing Geto and like regretting the path that Geto went down and the fact that Gojo didn't see it, couldn't stop it. Which, if we're all pretty honest, Gojo was a big part of what happened to Geto. Just the fact that Gojo was so untouchable and such like a god by the end that he was pretty much unreachable to Geto. Or at least in Geto's eyes it was that way. I'm sure Gojo probably would have, like he's the only one who asked and who noticed like what Geto, the fact that he had lost weight, that he didn't look great. He asked him if he's okay, and I think he expects to hear the truth because they're close enough, at least in his mind, for that. But Geto, of course, doesn't tell the truth. He lies. Says he's okay when he's very much not. So I doubt that there's anything Gojo himself could have done, except maybe if he, in that moment, had really pried, maybe Geto would have opened up to him. I doubt it, though. Because how do you tell someone that you're contemplating killing, like, 98% of the population of Earth? It sounds crazy. Because it is. And then in the moment before Gojo is sealed, he sees his friend's body. And, like, the Six Eyes tells him that, through the Six Eyes at least, this appears to truly be Geto. But as Satoru says, his soul knows that that's not him. He just knows deep down that that can't be him. And that's so interesting. Just for what it says about their relationship and how close they were. That he can just tell on an instinctual level that this can't be his friend. But while he's getting sealed, like the moment he sees Geto, there's almost a look of, he's not smiling, but he doesn't look upset, right? He looks almost happy to see him. Or at least in the moment before he realizes that there's no way this is actually his friend. He looks almost happy, in my opinion. Which is so darn heartbreaking when he's the one who had to kill him in the first place. And he winds up getting sealed like that. Just because he's lost in his memories, it seems. But yeah, so Jujutsu Kaisen just kind of has me in a stranglehold for just like my emotions. And I really sometimes like the fact that I'm still on season 2 and it's been years. But I started Jujutsu Kaisen late. I actually started it earlier this year. I kind of breezed through season 1, like I said, but I got stuck on season 2 because it kind of captured my heart. And when I get really into a piece of media, I kind of have to sit with it for a while to absorb it. Like, really feel the feelings, you know? Just a little quirk, but I feel like it makes a lot of things mean a lot more to me. But yeah, this happened before. I mean, this happens almost anytime I get super into some really good, mostly anime. I get really sucked in and just wind up sitting with it, and it becomes my obsession for a few months. Then I'm really looking forward to actually watching the rest because I'm also interested in seeing what happens with Yuji and Megumi because that seems like it's going to be interesting. Because I know, like, I've been spoiled on pretty much the entire plot of JJK, but I haven't gotten to see it, you know? And with how good, like, amazing the animation is for JJK, really looking forward to it. And that's where we'll leave it off for today. Thank y'all for joining me. Hope you have a nice evening.